PunchOut is a series of boxing games from Nintendo. Although originally starting in the arcades with PunchOut and Super PunchOut in 1983 and 1984, the games are perhaps better remembered for their console counterparts. In this video, I'll be reviewing the series installments on the NES, Super Nintendo, and Wii. And let's start with PunchOut for the NES. Although the game is also widely referred to as Mike Tyson's PunchOut when it first released in 1987, appropriately since Mike Tyson featured as the original end boss for the game. The 1990 reissue, however, removed Tyson due to Nintendo's license with him expiring and replaced him with Mr. Dream, for whom this is also his one and only appearance in the whole PunchOut series. And for the curious, Mr. Sandman was the original end boss in the PunchOut arcades. The NES PunchOut looks visually the most different to almost all the games, with a static background and the characters mostly limited to the center of the screen. The gameplay is quite simple. A and B do both left and right jabs, which become uppercuts if you hold the up button on the D-pad. You can dodge to the sides and block punches. And if you catch an opponent by surprise, you can do a powerful star punch. With minor alterations, pretty much every game in the series follows this same basic control scheme. In the game, you progress through the minor, major, and world circuits, defeating opponents from all around the world, all with colorful names, personalities, and tricky special moves. Some of the recognizable characters include King Hippo, who also appeared on Captain N the Game Master, Mr. Sandman, Bald Bull, and Super Macho Man, who all pretty much became mainstays of the series. The visual look might be simple, but the animation detail is excellent, so the fact that the game is a major downgrade from the arcade doesn't really hurt it. Plus, little touches like the cutscene animations and Mario as the referee are all a nice touch. And one area where this game is quite peerless is the music. PunchOut has easily one of the most recognizable soundtracks on the NES. The fight theme, the training theme, even the theme when you lose a fight are all extremely memorable. The game also makes high use of voice samples, and although they're quite muddy due to the system limitations, the audio in this game is excellent. Now, the game is definitely great fun for some simple boxing action, but it's perhaps not the most versatile title. But I'll talk a little bit more about this when we move into the game's successor, Super PunchOut. Released in 1994, Super PunchOut outwardly shares the character roster of the 1984 arcade. The gameplay is essentially the same as the NES PunchOut with two exceptions. The more minor of these is that besides blocking, you can also duck. The other major difference is the star punch, which is replaced by the power punch. In the NES PunchOut, you earned a star by surprising your opponent or interrupting their punch, and the star would be gone after one use or if you got hit. That is, unless you managed to get several stars. In Super PunchOut, you earn the more powerful punch by hitting your opponent consistently, thus filling up the power bar at the bottom of the screen. Not only can you keep super punching them as long as the bar is full, you don't lose all of it if you get hit once and can build your way back up. Super PunchOut's roster features an almost entirely different cast from the prior game, which is impressive, although mostly these are characters who had already appeared in the arcades. The only returning characters are Bald Bull, Mr. Sandman, and Super Macho Man, but the variety of opponents is excellent. The game uses even more sampled speech, which gives the game a lively feeling, and visually it's closer to the arcades, with the boxers now filling up the whole screen. It's a minor thing, but I feel makes the game visually more appealing. The animation work is still just as awesome, the music is good, but definitely not as memorable as the NES game, which is a shame. I kinda wish they would have recycled at least some of the music from the previous game. Now, a big difference to the NES PunchOut is also that you only get a single 3-minute round with each opponent, whereas you had 3 rounds in the previous game, and though you can win by decision, the real goal is to get a TKO. This also presents the biggest difference gameplay-wise between PunchOut and Super PunchOut. While the NES game is more dressed down, there is a clear emphasis in each fight about learning the opponent's weakness and exploiting it, such as finding a specific moment which allows you to get an instant knockout. Super PunchOut does have these gimmicks as well, but I always feel the game is more skill-oriented, with your ability to stay in the fight being far more vital than you meticulously learning the weakness of every opponent. Add to this, some of the fights in the NES game are rigged, so that even if you survive all 3 rounds, if you couldn't get a TKO against certain opponents, you'll automatically lose the fight. It's a small difference, but when compared to the NES Punch-Out, I find Super Punch-Out to be a far fairer game, albeit the difficulty does spike up much sooner because there are fewer fights. But also in the NES Punch-Out, you face off against the same opponents multiple times, which always felt a little cheap to me. Then we come to the Wii installment. The Wii title is technically a remake of the NES Punch-Out, but it also incorporates some of the elements introduced in Super Punch-Out, such as being able to regenerate your health by mashing buttons while your opponent is down, rather than the random power increase you could get between rounds in the NES game by hitting select. You can also duck, which is necessary since Bear Hugger is one of the Super Punch-Out characters included, alongside that cheating Irish bastard Aaron Ryan. Essentially, the game follows the same pattern as the NES title. It has great cinematics and wonderful cel-shaded graphics, and yes, it recycles and even rearranges the music from the NES game to fit each opponent and their nationality. By far, my favorite feature about this game is the fact that all the opponents speak the native language of the country where they're from. So, Von Kaiser speaks German, Bal Bull speaks Turkish, Soda Popinski speaks Russian, and the Mighty Tiger speaks Hindi. While some of the voice performances are a little weak, for instance I think Bal Bull and Mighty Tiger both sound a bit tired, we then get some excellent performances from the likes of Don Flamenco and Super Macho Man. The Wii title also has a really gradual learning curve, making it easily the most accessible of the Punch-Out games, but if the game feels too easy, then fret not, because after beating the final battle, you get to fight all the characters again with improved and more difficult techniques. The Wii Punch-Out is a really solid title, and I'm real tempted to say it's possibly my favorite entry in the series. My main complaint, though, is the fact that the game is essentially a remake of the NES title. I feel they could have taken more inspiration from Super Punch-Out, which I prefer as a game overall, but I was also disappointed that they only introduced one new character into the roster, the admittedly hilarious but pretty easy to beat Disco Kid. Still a worthwhile title. And as for the scores, I'll give the original Punch-Out 3.5 stars out of 5. It's a solid boxing title with a lot of charm, great for a pick-up and play experience, but one that maybe suffers from a little bit of padding. Super Punch-Out gets 4 stars out of 5. It's got better gameplay and feels more like a finished game all around, but it does have a painfully sharp learning curve. And the Wii Punch-Out deserved a near-perfect 4.5 out of 5. It just gets everything right, and the only thing I can maybe fault it for is a slight lack of original elements. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm TheHande Mäkinen, and keep it clean.
Welcome to my world.